Here we go. That's going to get you where you need to be.
That's right. That's what we're here for. As you can see, I'm not in my normal.
I know you're in a different milieu.
I'm actually in my office this morning at church. So I was trying to figure out my setup today, which I spent some time doing, and like I literally sort of just finished eating breakfast. I'm still drinking my coffee.
You're on, but you got it going, and here we are.
We're here. Betsy's Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Betsy's with us. And at least I'm sure other people will. Now say hello when you see us, folks. Well, Kira, look at you in a different place.
I am, yeah.
Offices.
It's funny. I did like a therapy session from here, and literally the therapist was like, "Where are you? It looks like you're in a church basement." I was like, "That is exactly where I am."
Funny you should say that. I am in the basement of a church. Good morning, Mary Osterbrock. Good to have you with us. Yeah, it is. Our jobs sure are funny.
Yeah.
Our jobs sure are. I'll just say that our jobs sure are funny.
But welcome to everybody. Good morning. You are with us. Are you there, God? It's Kira and Phil. I am the Reverend Kira Austin Young, priest in charge of St. Anne's Episcopal Church in Nashville.
And I'm Philip DeVaul. And I was checking my phone for questions for this.
That's your cue.
No, I was like, wait, I know that person. Good morning. Oh, I don't know who Unbridled Enthusiasm is, but I love that name because I feel like they're like, good morning.
Yeah.
I'm Philip DeVaul. I'm a priest at Church of the Redeemer in Cincinnati, Ohio, the queen of the Midwest. And boy, it's one of those, it's gray as all heck here. Haven't seen the sun in 2 days. How about you?
We're allegedly supposed to get sun, but this is like the only day in between,
right?
Rain, such as like early spring, though.
I have no positive expectations for anything in March, just to be clear. Like I have none, zero.
I will say that whoever came up with like the whole switch of daylight savings time was obviously not a clergy person, because that is like maybe my least favorite Sunday of
it's the worst Sunday of the year. for clergy, the daylight saving time springing forward, losing an hour of sleep. Someone always posts that meme from Princess Bride where it shows the six-fingered man and he says, "We've just sucked 1 hour of your life away."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's how it feels.
And like for me, it isn't just the hour of lost sleep. It's also the like anxiety that like my clock won't change.
I'll sleep in.
My alarm will go off.
Yeah. Although I will say, you guys, and then I'm going to answer Mary's very important question and say good morning to Leslie, who is Unbridled Enthusiasm.
Although I will say.
Oh, why is that happening?
Sorry, that was me.
Oh, that was you. It's so YouTube. Anyways, so this past Sunday, I got into my car and I changed my clock immediately. for the first time in my entire life.
Yeah.
My car is like usually, I mean, it's usually like literally sometimes months before I'll change my car. I mean, sometimes I'm just like, it'll be right in 6 months.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. The sort of shameful thing is that we haven't really been in the church building very much. Like there haven't been a lot of people in the church building. Right. And so when we fell back, a lot of the clocks didn't get changed.
Right.
Just in the church building. And I realized like 2 weeks ago, I was like, well, might as well just wait it out and they'll be right in a couple of weeks.
I had my clock in my office died like right before we went on, or maybe it was right after. I came back in my, like a month later, because I didn't come into my office for like almost a month, except for I guess to sign checks, because that never stops.
Yeah.
And doesn't matter. Tornado, pandemic, like, but where are the checks? Anyways, my clock died. I had just fixed it like a week ago. It was just, my clock was just dead for a year almost. And I was just like, meh. But anyways, it's a funky time. Now, Emily's with us, and I want to say good morning to Emily. and Leslie's back under her original name. Mary Osterbrock asks a very important question to me. And this, I don't know if you even know what she's talking about, Kira. So
I do.
okay.
I am a
you know about Cincinnati chili.
I don't want to say I'm a connoisseur of regional food traditions, but I enjoy knowing about them.
Have you had the experience of Cincinnati chili, or do you just know about it?
I just know about it. I have not actually.
So when you come to visit,
yes.
So the short answer, Mary Osterbrock, is yeah, of course. I live in Cincinnati. I don't understand when people don't like Cincinnati chili, and I'll go further. When people like it's not really chili, the fact that it's on pasta doesn't like spaghetti. Who cares? Like chili could be on. I mean, my wife the other day, she put chili on a baked potato. Would you say that's not chili? Still chili. It's delicious. So yeah, I do. I prefer Skyline over Gold Star because for the same reason that I prefer Coke over Pepsi. I like good things in my life. But my wife, my fantastic, wonderful wife, Krista, she actually has made her own Cincinnati chili recipe.
Oh.
Yes. And we don't generally eat it on spaghetti, on noodles, which is the custom. She likes to put it on a potato, or we'll put it on, but we'll do noodles. Or I'll eat it just like it is, like out of a bowl. I love it. It's good. You got to be in the right mood for it. It's a very specific taste, but kids who grow up in Cincinnati, when they come back home, they're like, gotta go get it.
That tastes like home.
Yeah. That tastes like home. But yeah, of course, Cincinnati chili, Grater's ice cream, Geta. Have you heard about Geta, Kira?
I have not.
Okay. So, well, let me tell you, Geta is like Cincinnati. How do I describe it? So it's almost like if you take sausage and mix it with barley oats, but like package it like sausage, like in the tube, not in a casing, but in like,
so kind of like
slice
boudin.
it up. Kind of like what?
Boudin in like Cajun.
I don't know.
It's basically sausage with rice and spices and stuff like in the.
Yes. But it's barley instead of, it's like a barley oat type of thing instead of rice. But yes, and this was so there were two sort of rounds of settling in Cincinnati. Maybe 3 rounds if you consider the fact of all the people who just feel like they're settling right now. I'm just kidding. It's a bad joke. It's a dad joke. But there was the first round of settlers in the 1700s. Cincinnati was founded very early on, and it's why it's called the Queen of the West, because it was the western, what do you call it, sort of frontier of the colonies, right? So, and then the second round of settlers in the 1800s were mostly German. So there's a huge German population and tradition in Cincinnati. And so Geta was this, like the German peasant food that they created. Cincinnati's first sort of industry was pork.
Okay.
So they took the pork byproducts, essentially, like what was left over, and they mixed them with the barley to create something that would make it last longer. And then you stick it in the griddle like you would sausage. Okay. And some people do not like it. I myself love it.
Love it.
So good. So good. And then Buskin cookies. Someone brought up Buskin. That's a local bakery.
Okay.
So we've got the bakery wars in Cincinnati between Buskin and Cervati, which are 2 old Cincinnati families. And then when you come to visit, I'll take you on an ice cream tour. We have not 1, not 2, but 3 fantastic ice cream brands in Cincinnati.
So I don't know if you know this about me, but the very first marathon that I ran was the Flying Pig Marathon.
I didn't know that. Isn't it great? I've heard it's one of the best marathons for marathon runners because the entire time there are people along the trail that are rooting for you. There's never like it's a party the entire time is what I've been told.
There were like a few, I think there was one sort of stretch along like a little bit of a highway that got a little desolate, but it was only like a mile or 2
out of 13, right?
Out of 26.2.
Oh, 26.2. I was thinking half marathons because that's as crazy as I've gotten. I've never gotten 26 crazy.
Yeah, no. So that was my first full marathon. And I, got to see a lot of Cincinnati in those 26.2 miles. And, was very impressed and liked the different, it's a hilly marathon. Like it's certainly not flat.
No, people think of Ohio as flat, and Most of Ohio north of us is flat, but the southern part of Ohio is hilly, and then southeast is Appalachia. So we have that. But yes, Cincinnati is the city of 7 hills, and it's a very hilly town for sure.
So. Yeah. So that was, it was a relatively short weekend, and I spent most of the time doing kind of marathon-y stuff. But
was eating ice cream one of them?
Yeah, we had graders before the race, or the night before the race.
Right, not the day of. Like, you know what? I'm gonna run 26.2 miles. Let's get some dairy in here. I know. It's not. So Leslie asks the question, Graders is the absolute best, and UDF, which is, so our convenience stores, we have United Dairy Farmers, UDF, and their ice cream is killer. So good. The third one, Leslie, you know this already. I'm going to say it, and you're like, of course, it's Aglamacys. This is the Aglamacys family, an old Cincinnati family, the Aglamacys. And they are probably my third favorite out of the three. But their chocolate, they have they're a candy place. Their chocolate is so good, and their ice cream. So Nashville, is there are there specific there's Tennessee barbecue, or what would be like a Nashville sort of food joy?
So the Nashville, especially right now, the kind of current Nashville famous thing is hot chicken.
Okay.
Which is
acceptable.
A fried chicken with the spices it's not like a buffalo wing or something where the sauce is on it. It's the spices are in the crust of the
right.
And the story goes that the kind of inventor of hot chicken was trying to punish her cheating spouse.
Oh.
And unfortunately, he ended up really, really liking the hot chicken.
Stories like this are really great.
So the original place here is called Prince's, and I know the original location had a fire, but they've opened a couple of other locations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't actually been out much, but
sure.
Fried hot chicken, and then what's called meat and three.
What is this? You had me at meat.
It's basically the southern kind of lunch plate, which is, whatever the cafeteria kind of thing is serving that day. Maybe it's meatloaf, maybe it's fried chicken, maybe it's some kind of casserole, and then your 3 sides, which may or may not be vegetables if you consider macaroni and cheese a vegetable.
Mac and cheese, collard greens, these are vegetables, or yeah.
So there are a couple of kind of famous local meat and three places in town.
So when I come to Nashville, you'll take me to a meat and three place, and then when you come to Cincinnati, I'm going to take you. We're gonna do some we'll do chili and ice cream, and then
chili. Arnold's is
we also have a ton of beer here.
Place
we have a ton of beer here too.
Yeah, I did avail myself of the beer in Cincinnati after the marathon. So.
Yeah, and then we're of course across the river from Kentucky, as are you in some ways. So bourbon, although Tennessee whiskey's its own thing,
right?
Kentucky whiskey is the best, it turns out. And we've got a wonderful distillery in Cincinnati area across the river from us, called New Riff, and that's fantastic. So I've got some stuff for you to try when you come. One of my favorite breakfast spots in all the world is there in Nashville.
Is it the Loveless Cafe?
It is the Loveless Cafe, and for lunch their barbecue is fantastic.
I have heard that.
Yes. I shouldn't know more about food in Nashville than you. I'm kidding. But you got to get on that place when things open back up.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a tourist destination, but
I will say
kind of a reason.
We really love when people come into town to go to the Loveless for breakfast, and then they have a family style thing that you can get.
Yeah.
And they just bring you, it's endless
Yep.
hash brown casserole and biscuits, of course. They're famous for their biscuits. And all of that good stuff. So
the first time I ever went to Loveless, because my dad was like, you got to go there. I was driving across country, and I got there, and I got there in the morning, and I like left a little early I was staying with some people in, I forget where they were staying. They lived out near it, but I had to like drive and get there, and because it's not like right in the middle of town. And then I got there and it was closed for renovations.
Oh no.
But the store was open,
and
the store had they had barbecue ready to go. Like they were still making barbecue and you were selling it at the store, even though they didn't have a restaurant.
Like open. A pound of meat or
So I literally got a pound of barbecue and a couple of buns, and I bought a thing of like their cured, their country ham. And I got in the car and I was just like, I ate one for breakfast and then like kept driving and ate one for lunch. I was in my 20s times, because now that I'm 41, I would never do anything like that.
No, of course not.
No, now I would eat them both right away.
Yeah.
And feel terrible. Big questions coming up here on the side that we need to answer. Last question first. When you had graters, did you have black raspberry chip?
I believe I did. And, I have actually we can get graters in the store here, like in the grocery store. And I have become quite fond of, there's like a toffee chip or something.
Yeah.
And that has been a little bit of one of my indulgences in the last few months.
Yeah. And when you can find graters anywhere, this is good. And then Emily von Allman asked, Fish Fry Fridays, they are big in Cincinnati because we have a large Catholic. We have a large Roman Catholic population. Has anyone asked either of us to do fish fries as Episcopal priests? I have not been asked to do one yet. You, any fish fry action?
No, that is certainly not a part of our culture in the South. I mean, I don't know if I think maybe some of the larger Catholic churches in town might do one, but it's not a thing in the way it is in like more Midwestern or more heavily Catholic areas of the country. My ex-husband his family was from Milwaukee, so we would go whenever we were up there, like visiting family, we would go for fish fry on Fridays. And I think when his sister got married, the rehearsal dinner was basically a fish fry. And
love it. I love it. I'm open, Emily. I've never done one, but hey, listen, if Redeemer wanted to do fish fry Fridays during Lent and starting next year, hey. I'm always looking for excuses. I mean, my biggest problem is Friday's my day off and I don't want to hang out with people on Friday, but I like the idea. And I do know people who are like the west side of Cincinnati is more Catholic. Like there's like 8 or 9 Episcopal churches on the east side of Cincinnati, and there's one on the west side. Right. So it's a very, very Catholic, and there's a lot of fish fries over on the west side. And so people will be like, oh, we're going over to the west side for a fish fry. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, right. So that's the thing. I'm open. I'm very open to the possibility. And there's a pretty big German influence in Tennessee as well. Is that true for Nashville or no?
Less so. I mean, there is an area of town literally called Germantown, and the history of kind of where things got settled is pretty interesting, and how kind of like patterns shifted over time. Literally Germantown, so kind of where I am in East Nashville kind of used to be the desirable place to live, and Germantown is on the other side of the river because they were those like kind of dirty immigrants. And now, of course, both places are very hip and
you are literally describing Cincinnati, right? The German area is called Over the Rhine.
Yeah.
Because there was a little stream, or like not even a full river, like a little stream.
Creek.
Right, creek. And on the other side of the creek was where those Germans lived. So people who weren't German called that little creek the Rhine, and they lived over the Rhine.
Yeah.
And that is currently the hippest place in Cincinnati to live, because it's right by downtown.
Yep, it's right by downtown.
Right, they are gentrifying the heck out of it, and it's like, oh, over the Rhine, which is like the most. And anyways, the term, even the name is so like, it's actually like, it's literally like a cultural slur that was just kind of appropriated.
Yeah,
like they were like, fine, call it that. We're not going anywhere, like. Yeah. And now it's the most popular place to live. So anyways,
But it's very fascinating. I've learned a lot about Nashville in the last few years, especially how there was a very thriving kind of Black business district.
Yeah.
And then when the interstate was built, the rich white people didn't want the interstate going through their neighborhood, so they put it through the Black neighborhood and essentially completely cut off that neighborhood from itself. Almost, it kind of bisected it and kind of devastated it economically. So when people kind of talk about, structural racism, I think that's such a good example of like, where do you put interstates? Where do you put trash dumps? Where do you
People don't even think about those things. That's not, well, let me start again. White people don't even think about that when we talk about our not believing in systemic racism and systemic injustice issues. We don't recognize that literally they'd be like, well, we're not going to put a bus line there.
Yeah.
Or we're not going to, like, the things that we consider like necessities are not going to be given to certain parts, or as you said, they'll just build, let's just put a highway there. Nobody lives there.
Right. Or like, who has the power to resist putting things in, kind of the NIMBY, like not in my backyard. Right. Who has the voice, who has the ear of kind of the people in power and making decisions.
That's right. Look at us getting here we go.
I know. I was like, well, we're talking a lot about food, which I think actually does connect with our faith and with our religion. We are a faith that eats, and
we are.
I think one of my favorite images of kind of the eschaton and of the kingdom of heaven is that banquet table.
Yeah.
And that's in Isaiah of like, as I mentioned earlier to you, Phil, I'm doing a funeral this afternoon, that like mountain of rich marrow and like fine wines.
Yeah.
And just that lovely image of everyone kind of gathered around a banquet table with not even just like, oh, here's some spaghetti or whatever, but like the nicest stuff.
Not McDonald's.
Filet mignon or whatever your thing is.
Yeah. Osso buco and like a nice Brunello, like some real deal stuff. Clearly I'm thinking about Italy. Yeah. So yeah, it is. We definitely like to eat. And I mean, I think how important communion is for us.
Yeah.
You think about how important that is, that there is something about it, and including like people's very strong preferences about what kind of bread they use and what the wine's like.
Yeah.
Those are what kind of wine do you guys use?
We just use like the Taylor port.
You use port though?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to an Episcopal church where they use cream sherry?
No.
Yep. My previous church, when I got there, they were using cream sherry. It was like not red. And it was one of the first changes I made.
Yeah.
I was just like, could we have red wine? I mean, I know that
feel like
it doesn't need to be.
Is like pretty important to the symbolism.
I think so. So I think so too. I will say I've been to more than one church that does cream sherry, and it's very odd. It's just very odd. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
and for the blood of Christ today, we'll be having this nice Chardonnay.
I know.
It just happened. It is funny though that we all have this expectation that it better not be expensive wine, and like not because we're cheap. But like, although, because if I don't know, I mean, we aren't cheap about certain things, but like if it was like really nice wine, it would be confusing almost. Like I almost think making it port because it's a fortified wine and not the kind of thing you would normally like have at a dinner table.
Right.
We almost need that little bit of like disconnect. Like even our homemade loaves or like communion loaves that people make, they never look like a loaf of bread the way you and I would think.
Yeah.
It would be too confusing for people. They need it to be like the first time you went to the Holy Land and they used pita. I thought it was great, but I was like, oh, right. So meanwhile, we have a very robust bread guild at this church that has not been making bread for the last year, as you might have guessed.
Yeah.
And due to the circumstances of the way we're coming back into things, we have wafers right now.
Yeah.
And my 3-year-old took communion for the first time in a year. And he walked up and he's almost 4. So he was almost 3 when we last time we took communion. And he's so excited and he gets it and he goes, "Is this bread?"
Mood.
Right. Now, I grew up in a church with wafers, and my first 2 or 3 Episcopal churches had wafers. So I'm very comfortable with wafers. But I understand that it's not bread the way you and I would like.
Right. Yeah. I'm also very comfortable with wafers. I'm not like theologically opposed to them, but I do kind of prefer actual bread,
Yep.
something that more closely resembles bread.
Yep.
I grew up Episcopalian, and I think a lot about probably communion wine was my first experience with any kind of like alcoholic beverage. And I just remember it kind of being like, oh, this is like kind of icky.
Right. Why do people do this?
Tastes like cough syrup, or,
right.
It wasn't something desirable.
Yeah. It's a really good deterrent.
Yeah.
One time when I was like 6 or 7, I grabbed my parents' beer. I was younger than that. I might've been younger than that. And I was like, "Can I taste it?"
Yeah.
And they were like, "Yeah."
Sure.
Because they knew I was going to hate it.
Yeah.
And I tasted it and was like, "Oh, I hate this." And I'm not kidding. The next time I had beer, I was 27 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I recognize that's an extreme reaction from an extreme man, but I just want to point out that that's a good, my daughter was like, "What are you drinking?" I was like, "Well, it's bourbon." And she's like, "You like bourbon?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I like bourbon quite a bit." And she's like, I was like, "You want to smell it?" And she smelled it and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like,
"Why are you drinking gasoline?"
You hold that in your heart, right? Keep that there for a very, very long time. Right. So yeah, Emily's one of our bread bakers, and we are definitely excited to bring it back. Yeah, and I think because of a lot of, and as Leslie pointed out, some of them probably have been making bread. The bread guild will probably expand due to the surge in bread makers. We just can't use it communally. I think you're totally right. I started, as some people know, I started baking bread throughout the pandemic, though I don't think anyone wants sourdough communion bread, but that's okay.
Why not?
Well, we have a specific recipe. I'll tell the people on this group, I'm really interested before, when we get back to baking, I think it would be really wonderful if we could come up with, and one of my associates says we have this somewhere, it exists in the ether, a gluten-free recipe for the bread. Because I would love for our communion bread that everyone takes to be gluten-free, so we don't have to differentiate, but it's still bread. Because right now, by the way, or traditionally at Redeemer, you'd either have this yummy homemade bread, or if you were gluten-free, you'd get those crappy wafers that look like
gluten-free wafers.
They're like Cheez-Its without the cheese.
I know.
That's the texture. It's like if someone forgot to put cheese in the cheese. It's like it would be like if you were showing COVID symptoms and you were eating a Cheez-It. You were like,
"Yeah, this doesn't taste like anything."
No, this doesn't taste like anything. What's going on? You don't have COVID. You're just eating a gluten-free wafer. So that's how they taste. It's not good news. It's not good news. So I would like to see us change that up if possible, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So here's kind of a question related to that, and kind of related to what we're talking about. What are the limitations of what makes something bread or wine or not? Because I know there's been some conversation about alcohol removed wine,
right?
For recovery Eucharists, or for people who are very strictly abstaining from alcohol. And is it gluten that makes bread? What is valid matter for the Eucharist?
So I'm fine with alcohol-free wine as an option. I wouldn't want to make it normative, but to have it available. And I've been at churches where the grape juice is the thing, and it just, you're drinking grape juice, man. But I also had wonderful experiences there, and I remember like one of the people being like, this is communion. I was like, dude, I'm not saying it's not. We're cool. Like, we're cool. It's communion. Yeah, I am I'm very open to what's possible in a pinch. But it goes back to, like, to me, the difference between what we're willing to try and what we consider normative. And I know normative is like not sexy theological language, and it also can be used in a really damaging way. But trying to understand what we create as a norm, and then understanding, so my personality is and has been for a really long time, like, that you have to know the rules to be able to break them. That I'm a fan of breaking rules when necessary, but it requires knowing the rules really well.
Yeah.
Like, there's a difference between someone like Faulkner writing these really long sentences because he understands how sentence structure works really well, that he can bend it that way. Or E.E. Cummings, like, understanding language so well that he can do sorts of crazy things with language, and just like my 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, there's a difference, right?
Right.
And so, like, I'm comfortable with us coming up with ways that go around what kind of eschew the norm when necessary for certain reasons. For as you said, like we've got a group of people who are predominantly, if people are abstaining from alcohol, or for addiction reasons, or something like that, having some kind of real option for that makes sense. But but when it becomes sort of like, it doesn't really matter if it's bread and it doesn't really matter if it's wine, that's where I get like the sort of like it doesn't matter attitude. There's a lot of, like, in the name of sort of populist.
Why not just use like pizza and Coke? Or
Right. In college, in seminary, one of my friends said that at the time he was like, "You're the kind of guy." He's like, "I think you're in our class. You're the guy most likely to celebrate communion with Twinkie and a Coca-Cola." and I was like, and I literally at the time I was like, "Yep, that's me. I totally would." And now I'm like, I don't know that I would. But I mean, again, like, what is the scenario? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do? What's it about?
Yeah.
Right. So I don't like when there's a thing that can happen in our crew, in our tribe, where there's people who will be like, you know what, theologian, like, that's sort of down on theology. Oh, theology, you don't need all that. And it's like, well, it turns out you do, because bad theology can harm people. Bad theology can do bad things. Bad theology is what brought us gifts like prosperity gospel. Right? So like you have to have, it's really helpful when you have smart, like, people in your community to use them and for like in this area. So I don't know. I'm open, but I would want to be just like, we just got to understand why, how, and when.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think?
I agree. Like, having celebrated communion in sort of different, or celebrated the Eucharist in different settings, what I would do on a Sunday morning in my church is pretty different from what I would do at camp for a closing Eucharist, or on a retreat or something.
Yep.
I think where I kind of start to ask questions is like, what does it mean? What does it mean for it to be bread and wine? Like, if you were in a different culture, is there something that would be similar and kind of like represent those same kind of like that food group of like the stuff of life in terms of bread? And then, kind of a beverage. Like, if you were in Ethiopia, would you use injera, or, something made out of like teff flour? Or, if you were in Central America, like maybe like, would you use a tortilla? And so I think that category of bread might look different in sort of different settings, and I wonder, is that's kind of like quote unquote acceptable?
But just trying to make it cool isn't.
Right. Like, just to be kind of edgy or
convenient.
Yeah.
The first communion wasn't convenient
No.
or cool.
Yeah, and I think to that point of like, oh, yeah, they probably used something that looked like pita or something that was kind of like a flatbread, not a big, beautiful sourdough
Right.
loaf.
Yeah.
So what is that? How does that kind of translate across cultures, across time, across what is available in terms of, just available materials? I think one of the fascinating things to me is that in America, the oldest grape growing region is actually New Mexico, because when the Spaniards came and had missions there, they needed to grow communion wine.
Wow.
And so like that was, and even the oldest, the most distinguished vineyards in France, in Italy, like a lot of those are based around monasteries who were, and cathedrals and kind of church. It was grown for church purposes, for communion wine, and not just kind of for like to go great with that Asabuco
right.
or whatever. So that's, if there is a place where perhaps like grapes would not grow, I think it's so interesting to think about like a time where like, oh, you couldn't just run down to the liquor store and get more port if you ran out. Like you're literally like growing making your own wine.
That's right.
Which I think there is a church in Tennessee in my diocese where they use homemade wine. One of the parishioners makes wine.
Well, that's intense.
That is intense. I heard it's not very good.
Well, it's in Tennessee. I mean, like our palate is adjusted to like European wines, California, and European style wines. And California wines are, they're California, but it's all made in the European style, right? So anything that's not that's going to confuse us, and anything that's not polished. When I was in college, I was living in a little town called Somerville, Massachusetts, which is a Medford and Somerville area have a pretty large Portuguese immigrant population. My next door neighbor was a Portuguese immigrant, and he had a carport. And he had a vineyard growing on his carport.
Wow.
And he made his own wine in his home. And he gave me some, and it was awful. And he was so proud of it. And I loved this man. He spoke very little English, and I spoke no Portuguese.
Yeah.
But he was a lovely, lovely man. It was actually like it's totally one of those situations where you do not have to speak the same language to like care for each other.
Yeah.
And he was lovely to me and to the people. When we were college kids living in this house, there was a lot of attitudes he could have had, but he was just lovely. And he invited me over to drink it, and he like gave me a whole bottle of it, and he like made me stand there and drink it in front of him because he was so excited.
Yeah, I wanted to see.
This is a thing. This is a thing. But anyways, it's so. But to your point about communion wine and bread. So the Roman Catholic stance is that gluten-free does not count. That has to have gluten in it for it to be real.
Yeah.
Which I assume means, I don't know if the rules are the same, that it has to be alcoholic. I don't know if it has to be fermented. I don't know about the wine. But for the bread, they will not have gluten-free wafers in the Catholic Church, which means if you have celiac disease and are a recovering alcoholic, I don't believe there's any way for you to take communion.
Yeah,
that's where I see the rub.
Right. Yeah, I have a parishioner who came from the Catholic Church, and she, I think, basically cried the first time she had communion in the Episcopal Church because she could actually have a gluten-free wafer.
Yep.
And she has celiac, so that was in and of itself like hospitable,
an act of kindness. Yep. Do we want to talk at all about the Roman Catholic Church right now, or do we want to move on?
I mean, it's certainly on my mind. So
Yeah. Let's take a break for a moment for a question from our friend Albert, which I think you will appreciate.
Oh, yeah.
He asked, what are the pros? He said, I love this question, by the way. Friends. Oh, by the way, Leslie, before I get to this question, I love Cheez-Its. Imagine them without imagine them without any cheese flavor and without any salt. That's the problem.
Yeah.
The texture, but with and a little crumblier. I guess I always attributed the delicious texture of a Cheez-It to the cheese.
Yeah.
So imagine if someone took all of the goodness out of a Cheez-It and then handed you a cracker and then said, this is the body of Christ. You'd be like, what did they do to him? Okay. Here's a one for you. What are the goods and bads, pros and cons even, of the 1662, 1928, and 1979 BCP? The 1662, the 1928, and the 1979 prayer books. What are pros and cons?
You're
so nervous. By the way, the look on your face when I asked this question, if I could bottle it, I'd sell it as like trepidation. That's what I would call it. Or maybe horrified. I'm not sure. Tell what's going on.
Here's the thing.
Go on.
I have close dear friends who I love, who love going on and on about the 1662 prayer book, the 1928 prayer book. What's great out of them? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? When we revise the prayer book, we should bring this stuff back. I don't care. I mean, I took a vow in my ordination to use the 1979 prayer book.
Yep.
For better or for worse.
Right.
In
for richer and for poorer.
Yeah. To me, that is the normative book. Yeah. And I don't spend a lot of time or energy kind of thinking about if it only had this thing from the 1662 prayer book or whatever. Right. I'm actually quite fond of the 79 prayer book. There are certainly things that could be better.
Yep.
I wish that Rite 2 had a prayer of humble access in the Eucharistic service.
Yep.
And there are maybe ways you can bend the rubrics to kind of make that happen. And
I mean, you could just put it in there if you wanted.
Right.
I don't like that prayer in the Eucharist, so I'm okay with that. But I'm a child of the 79 prayer book as well. I mean, I became an Episcopalian as an adult, actually, not a child. Yeah. And the 79 prayer book was the prayer book. It wasn't. I mean, this is the thing. First of all, like none of us remember the 1662 prayer book.
Yeah.
So if you have a friend that's like espousing the purity or the beauty of the 1662 prayer book, they need to lighten up. And I mean, the benefit is, I guess isn't it the first like major prayer book? And
yeah. And I mean, I went to a church growing up where actually on July 4th or the Sunday nearest to July 4th, we would do the liturgy out of the 1662 prayer book because that was like the prayer book that the founders would have used.
Sure.
And, like as a historical document.
Sure.
And as kind of an object of like, not curiosity, that sounds a little flippant, but kind of like historical.
It's novelty though, or maybe connection to your past in some way, like an honoring of the history of the church.
Yeah. I get a little bit nervous when people think things are good just because they are old.
I get nervous when people think things are good just because they're old or just because they're new.
Just because they're new. Yeah.
In either direction, I'm like, hold on. Right. I agree. So one of the things that was so fascinating to me is that one of the major pushes of the reformers, be they continental or English, was a desire for language to be held in the tongue of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that the English of the 1662 prayer book no longer serves that purpose. It is not our language at all. It is a very, very, very foreign understanding of English.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like an important point to be made. Like, is the language beautiful? Yes. Is it helping us understand what we are saying and how we worship, or is it standing in the way of us understanding? And I think if it's getting in the way, we want to be clear about it. And now, I don't just mean if we don't understand a word, we should get rid of it. There are words that are important, theological words that are important, that we continue to use and that we hope we can sort of make sure has a place in the vernacular. But 400 years or 350 years ago, that's the language has developed significantly. And so I find that to be a hindrance, right? 1928 prayer book is the good is it's really well organized. It's really easy to use for someone who's never, you could start at the beginning of a service and go to the end and you wouldn't have to flip around a bunch like you do in the 79 prayer book. The 79 prayer book reminds me of when they get the guide to the afterlife in Beetlejuice. And they're like, this thing reads like a set of stereo instructions.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a choose your own adventure book sometimes. You're like,
choose your own worship adventure.
X, flip to page 365. Like, if you want to do Y, go to page 383. Like,
oh, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah.
Yes, the organization of it is, I think, one of the major downsides of the 79 prayer book.
Yeah.
But
other than that,
logically, like, you know, I mean, to some extent, the 1928 prayer book is contained in the 79 prayer book,
right,
in the form of Rite One.
That's right.
So you have some of that was kind of the big compromise, right? Was like, we're still going to keep some of this stuff, and I think that's going to be true. You know, whenever the last general convention like memorialized the 1979 prayer book, which nobody really knows entirely what that means.
I have a really good guess about what it means, though, but go ahead.
But essentially it was kind of reassuring people like this is not going to go out of use completely. I think. And to the extent that like the theological shifts that happen in the 79 prayer book are a little more like kind of back to our kind of Anglo-Catholic evangelical leaning. They're a little less reformed. They're a little more like Anglo-Catholic. And so you can go through the prayer books or the history of prayer books and kind of see those shifts throughout throughout time. But you know, how do I say this? In most cases, nobody is like a prayer book literalist.
Right.
Like I will, you know, there's a lot of criticism from people who I tend to kind of side with that are critical of like more progressive wings of the church, you know, maybe changing language or inserting different wordings of things or getting rid of things altogether. And at the same time, those people in my wing of the church are very happy to insert things that are not rubrical, like say the prayer of humble access in a rite to Eucharist, or you know, do things that are kind of outside of the rubrics. And I mean, I will say maybe Scott Gunn is the only prayer book literalist that I know.
And he's a friend and he lives down the street from me. He's a great influence. I mean, in that sense, I think it comes from a really healthy place in him. It's not an intellectual or sort of a clerical like pursuit. It is like a spiritual, for him, it's very spiritual. It is a spiritual adherence to the idea that like, we wrote this down like this for a reason. What would it look like if we actually practiced it?
Yeah, which I think is good. But
I've moved in that direction significantly since coming to Ohio, actually.
Yeah. And I think that when people that are, I don't like these kind of binary words, but people that are more conservative in their practice of the prayer book also don't follow the rubrics in cases.
That's
right.
And
then they're very critical of people on the kind of quote unquote more progressive side for not following the rubrics. And what ends up happening is like nobody's actually like following the letter of the rubrics. We're all kind of doing this mix of what's in the prayer book and what is tradition and what we learned in seminary and what we learned from our mentors. And you end up with some differences in local practice.
Historically, I have embellished certain aspects and shifted certain aspects of the order of service to suit what I thought was appropriate. And I have moved back away from that in the last 2 years, even since coming to Redeemer. So I have moved towards trusting the rubrics and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
And that includes and you know what, and this is the thing that I want to say, what it has required for me to do is sacrifice my ego. And I think that's actually a really healthy thing to require of Christians.
Yeah.
Not just big egotists like me. Because priests all think they know best.
Yes.
So Rite 1, at the beginning of Rite 1 Eucharist, you can start with the declaration of the Great Commandment. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I started doing that at Rite 2. At every church I was at, and in every service, the beginning of the church, you would have the declaration of the Great Commandments, the statement of the Great Commandments. And then and I love it. And it's a great way to start a worship service. It's right there in Rite 1. Yeah. And in Rite 2, it's only there in the context of the
litany of the
penitential order. So it's only presented in a penitential context. So I was really frustrated by that. So I just did it. I got rid of that. After in the last 2 years, I don't know if anyone here remembers that I used to do that. And I used to make everybody else at the church do it. And I got rid of it because I was like, something hit me one day where I was like, who the hell do I think I am? The rector of the church. So what? We have a prayer book. We have a book. And I'm not smarter than it. Now I disagree with it at certain places. And luckily, because of the way it's created, there are things that I don't have to do.
Yeah.
And there's things, but there's language that if I got to pick and choose, and I mean, there's little changes. I think, so we're at the point where when I also used to say something different when I handed out the bread and wine, and I got rid of that too. Because who the hell am I to say something different? So I've changed that up. But the only change that is present still is like the very opening thing, blessed be God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then the response is, instead of saying blessed be his kingdom, we say blessed be God's kingdom now and forever. But that's the one rubrical change that we've made. Yeah. And we're still saying God.
Right. I feel like that's not, that's a pretty and I
that's
think
a rubrical, it's like a rubrical fudge more than a change.
I saw an argument that basically said there should be explicit instructions that is allowable.
Right. And I think we could move towards that. But we haven't even talked about the best part about the 1979 prayer book. The baptismal covenant, baby.
Baptismal covenant.
Come on. I mean, so Albert, the centrality of the Eucharist and the insistence upon the centrality of the baptismal covenant with the recognition of baptism as a corporate event, a church feast, really. Mm-hmm. And because the entrance into the Christian faith is not a private matter, it is entrance into the community. And the baptismal covenant if we only focused on learning that and taking it seriously. I can't speak to this in the 28 and the 1660 whatever too, but the catechism in the 79 is fantastic. And the preservation of those documents, like the 39 articles and the statement from the Council of Chalcedon, as historical documents. I think that's one of those great Episcopal moves of we're going to put them here. They're not doctrine.
Yeah.
Although with the Council of Chalcedon, I was like, you could keep that one. Yeah. And 37 of the 39 articles rock. So we probably could have kept those. But anyways, so I think that's the best thing about the 79 is the covenant, the baptismal covenant. And it took me a while to get on board with how awesome that is. But it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are certainly very, very big moves that I, having grown up with the 79 prayer book, kind of took for granted that, Eucharist was the primary mode of worship on a Sunday, and that baptism was a public matter.
Yeah.
And like those are, and I think those are very important to me theologically. Practically, that is harder in places where there are like priest shortages.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and like I think we've run up against some issues with that, obviously, during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Dude, do you want to know what we did for our private baptisms during the pandemic? We filmed them.
Yeah.
And then we spliced them into the live stream on Sunday so people could watch them.
Oh, nice.
So people were like, they weren't there for the moment, but they witnessed the baptism.
Yeah, I've done one, and it was part of our live stream. So
pretty psyched about that.
There were still, people affirming that, affirming the things that we affirm as part of the community.
That's right. Emily asks, what's the difference? Why do we have the red and blue covers with the BCP? And I don't have a good answer to that at all.
I don't either. And I mean, I know,
and almost all churches are red. We have the blue BCPs.
We have blue hymnals and red BCPs.
So some people will do blue and red hymnal, to differentiate between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I think we do that. I think we have blue hymnals and blue BCPs and red hymnals. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
So we, when the tornado destroyed
mine's black, so
yeah,
but it's also got a Bible in there. It's very thick.
Yeah. When the tornado destroyed St. Anne's historical nave in 1998, they kind of went to a more like a full text bulletin rather than having the Book of Common Prayer. We don't have pews; we just have chairs. So when usually in the before times, people would come in and they would get handed a bulletin and a hymnal, and like they'd sing from the hymnal and then follow along in the bulletin. And there are pros and cons to that. One being that, as we mentioned, the 1979 prayer book is a little bit difficult to navigate if you're not super familiar with it. But I think what gets lost is that, like, I remember being a kid and like being bored in church or like not really feeling engaged with the sermon or whatever, and just flipping through the prayer book and kind of discovering the richness of the prayer book outside of what I was used to hearing kind of on Sunday morning church, or I grew up going to an Episcopal school and we did morning prayer every morning. But like all those prayers in the back for every kind of sort of occasion, discovering some of those, and reading through the catechism, which was not a thing that I had kind of known.
I think we have a lot of adults that, given the option, would read through the prayer book instead of listening to our sermons. So I get it. Oh, Phil's going. He thinks he's really on a tear right now.
He's on a roll.
Oh Lord, he thinks he's on a roll. Let me what can I look at? We're having these discussions right now internally about when we come back out of this pandemic, how we will have bulletins. And I have always been a proponent of the full service including the music being in the bulletin. And our communications person has done a killer job of that. She's awesome. And I love that. It is pretty labor intensive.
Yeah.
And you use a lot of paper. The biggest critique I've always gotten from people. Now, I will argue when people say it's a waste of paper, I say it's a use of paper.
Right.
That's not the same as waste, right? Like you don't say kids are wasting paper when they're learning how to color in kindergarten. And we don't say that it's a waste of electricity when you're lighting up an office building that needs light. Like, I think that it's a genuinely valid use of paper.
Yeah.
That being said, it's a lot of paper. And if there are ways that we can move away from that and get people to a place where we are not going through so much and using so much paper, I'm on board. I'm interested very much. But it is one of those things where I've done a little bit of very minor and very friendly battle with our we have an eco-palean group.
Yeah.
And they're awesome. Like, their ideas are great. But they've always kind of pushed back with me on this one. And so this has been one of the areas of tension. So it'll be interesting to see. We've got a real, will we have a bunch of people, following like this with their phones? Get a QR code, because we did it in the park. We're meeting in the park right now, and we're not printing anything out.
Wow.
So the bulletin is available for you by Friday. and you can print it out yourself if you want at home and bring it in, or you can look at it on your phone or tablet. And I have significant reservations about people being on their phones that way. But again, they probably already were. So I don't know. By the way, so I think by the way, I think the Ecopalians are going to win this. I think I'm going to lose. But if we have a genuine way that people can easily follow along in the service, then everybody wins. And that's all I really care about.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of questions about, how the balance between that kind of hospitality or ease of use and, not just the environmental costs. We recycle the used bulletins and whatever else, but it's a good amount of it, just cost, the
it
copier,
costs money and time and energy
and the paper and time. That's a lot every single week.
Yeah.
And I do think it will be interesting to see, I don't know, like I think I would have trouble as a clergy person, and I use my iPad to preach from and currently lead worship from.
Yeah.
But to look out and kind of see people with their phones, like
yeah, I agree. And I wonder, what I'm sorting through is how much of that is my own baggage.
Yeah.
And my own stuff. And how much of that is, is that my conservative, because I have a conservative streak, as it were. What am I trying to, conservatism is not bad. What are you trying to conserve?
What are you trying to conserve? Yeah.
Right? And what I've said is, when I've heard people say, well, the sad thing about the bulletins is then people don't know how to use the book. And I hear you. I'm much more concerned with people learning the prayer than where to find it out of the gates. Like, I want people to learn how to pray to God.
Yeah.
To worship.
And I actually think this is one of those places where like the values behind both things are very good.
Yep.
Like there's not,
they're competing values.
They are competing values. Like
by definition.
They're not, one is not a better value than the other. They're just, we hold them in tension, and, maybe we try something for a little while and then we go back, or whatever.
Final parting shot at a whole generation, with no remorse. The reason that in the last General Convention, the Bishop of Texas made the master move of proposing that we memorialize the 79 prayer book, I genuinely believe was to confuse people long enough to keep the boomers from having the opportunity to revise the prayer book. I genuinely think that it's a power move that was totally widely accepted, but not as a power. They didn't see it that way, but it's a power move that delays any kind of real change to the prayer book until the boomer generation of clergy and quote unquote theologians are out of power. That's what I actually think.
Gen X bishop for the win.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And Andy Doyle, he hits and misses, but he's a savvy man and a good bishop, and a Jesus lover, obviously.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
I like Andy quite a bit, and it's one of those things you don't have to stand someone to. You can just think they're a good bishop. You don't have to agree with every single aspect. Really quick, and then we got to stop here.
Yes.
And Emily brings up, the phone issue. Also, it's like pushback some people have against electronic plate and pledge payments. Like, there are people who are like, I need to write a check and put it in the thing. And again, as the head of a nonprofit, I want to create every single avenue possible for you to give money to the church.
Yeah.
So yes, write your checks and stick them in the thing. Got it. And also, anyone should be able to give if they want to, and we should not be creating barriers to giving when we know how important it is to the running of this church that we care so much about, right?
Yeah.
What have you been listening to?
Okay. So I know you're not a podcast person entirely,
but I'm open.
But there is a podcast that I think you would really enjoy, and it's not long. Like, the episodes aren't long. They're like 20-minute episodes.
Magic words. What's it called?
Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Song Exploder.
No, tell me.
it basically breaks, like, every episode breaks down. It's an interview with one of the songwriters or musicians, and it breaks down their process of writing and recording and piecing together the song. And my husband shared with me one of the episodes and about a song called Heat Waves by a band called the Glass Animals.
Ooh.
And it is like, you know how you said like you listen to a song like 8,000 times, and
yeah,
I have been listening to this song just over and over again. Like
wait.
It is my background music in my head now. I'm just like, you know, like I'm going about, I'm unloading the dishwasher, just like jamming to the song.
Waves, Glass Animals. Okay. I'm checking it out.
So listen to the song and then listen to the Song Exploder episode about it, because there is an interesting celebrity cameo.
I will check that out. I dug Julian Baker.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I got my record shipped from East Nashville, Tennessee, from Oconee Records. It's the Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings 3-record set of quote unquote lost songs. It's a special box set. You could already get it all digital, so I know all of it. But Krista got it for me for Christmas, and it didn't show up till just now. And it's this gorgeous LP box. You open it up. It's got a booklet with all the songs with the chords and lyrics.
Oh, wow.
To play along. And then the records, which are beautiful. And I love Gillian Welch so much. She's an Eastern SP. You know this, I'm saying this for the benefit of everybody else. She lives in East Nashville, and their studio is in East Nashville. It was actually greatly affected by the tornado. And what happened was, when they were rescuing music from their, as the rain was coming in and everything had been torn up, they were rescuing their music that had been in their vaults. And then they were like, and then all of a sudden there was a pandemic, and they had all this stuff in their basement of their house. And she was like, why are we saving this if we're not going to use it for anything? And then she ended up putting out 3 records worth of stuff.
Wow.
And it's from way before. None of it's new. It's all old, but it's all unreleased.
Yeah.
And I just love them. But Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings are just my favorite performers. And I mean, period. Like, my favorite performers. And their music is so fantastic. And they just won a Grammy.
Yeah.
For best folk album. They put out an album during the pandemic of home recordings of covering other people's songs. One of the greatest songwriters of our time, and she's just recording other people's music, which Dylan does too, and I love it so much. But they do really wonderful versions of a couple Dylan songs, a John Prine song, some great old folk tunes, and it's just really lovely stuff. But anyways, so that's been my jam lately. And I listened to the entirety of Neil Young's Comes a Time album this morning when I was getting ready for work. So that's a really good album. You've got a funeral today and a vestry meeting?
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're
gonna have a beautiful day, and you're going to like bless a lot of people today.
Yeah. This is a big sad funeral for us.
I'm sorry.
Actually, for the church. This was a person who was active in Episcopal Church women on a national level, and really, as I'm saying in my funeral homily, like, really left the church better than she found it.
Yeah. Like a genuine spiritual mother of your congregation.
Yeah, in profound ways. Yeah. And, you know, a blessing is that I was able to go to the hospital on Friday and do last rites. And then she died early Saturday morning. So, yeah.
I'm sorry for that loss. And I know today that means we carry a special weight on the days when we have to officiate burial services. We love doing them, right? I mean, they are unique and special in our vocation, but I don't know about you, but I carry a certain weight with me. I mean, I know you do, because you even have a routine for what you do after them in normal times.
Yeah. So I told you that I normally go and sit at the bar at a place and eat a hamburger and drink a beer. And I was telling my husband about this, like, I'm not going to get to do that today. And he said, well, you know, after your vestry meeting, like, let me know when you want it. And like, I'll go get you a hamburger, and like, you'll have a cheeseburger and fries and a beer when you're done with your vestry meeting. So,
man, can I marry Michael? I love that. That is beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm taking care of you that way. I hope you have, I think today has the capacity. It's just going to be a really holy day, which means you'll be exhausted at the end of it. But my prayer for you is that it's a good exhaustion,
Yeah.
and I hope that it all goes well.
Thank you.
Thanks for making time for the crew today. It was fun to be with you.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone for joining us. And we will be here next week. We're sort of light on questions. And so we've been kind of riffing, but please submit your questions or even just if they're not specific questions, like something you'd like to hear us riff
Topics
on
you'd
or
like
discuss.
for us to riff on.
So we'd love to get your input.
Yeah, that's right. Emily, first time joiner, you did a great job of jumping in that way. Leslie, you always are ready to contribute in that way. And Mary got us off to a start with all of the Cincinnati talk and the food, which, I mean, as you saw, we could talk about food for the whole hour. That would not, and we'd still have more to talk about.
Oh no, we should talk about Jesus.
Right. I know we've been talking about food for quite a long time. Let's talk about Jesus. As always, guys, a joy to be with every single one of you. Check us out. We'll be back together next week, same time, same channel. And I think that's it.
That's it.